good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of the Launchpad. Hard to believe that we are already on episode 7. It feels like I just started this project, but I am having a blast. This is one of the favorite shows of mine that I get to do every single week. Last week, I hosted Derek Brown with FTN, David Gautieri, and we did a very, very deep dive on tight ends. We talked about rookies, we talked about second-year breakout candidates, we talked about some veterans, so I highly recommend checking that out. And today, we are going to go through every single position. We're talking quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, and we are going to highlight the best and worst values at each position. I'm joined with CBS's Heath Cummings and Gridiron Ratings' Matt McCarthy. Matt, let's go ahead and introduce you first. You and I connected almost a year ago to the date. It was right before the season started, and instantly just hit it off and became great friends. So happy that we finally get a chance to do a show together. Why don't you let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter, where they can find your written work, and what you've got going on nowadays?
So, yeah, we actually both came up at the same exact time. I had to step away for a few months. So you kind of jolted ahead of me a little bit, Dave. So I got to catch back up. But so I'm over at Gridiron Ratings now. We're actually going to be doing all the redraft stuff for them over on that site. I'm really excited. I'm happy to be a part of them. No written work yet. We're starting the video shows and podcasts very soon, like this weekend, possibly recording soon. And yeah, I'm really, you're someone like it's funny. We actually both got like Fantasy Pros ranked expert certified in the same year. So it's kind of funny when I put my ranks out, I'm actually looking at your ranks too. I'm like, all right, let's see what the two newbies are kind of thinking on, guys. And I'm just really happy to be here. And the same thing, I'm big friends, we talk all the time. I'm really excited to finally come on.
Yeah, I noticed you and I both have some spicy rankings. I feel like a lot of the people that have been doing it for a while, they go a little chalky with it. And you and I, we're trying to make a statement with those rankings. And I really like that. And then this man probably needs no introduction, but we've got Heath Cummings here as well. Thank you so much for joining the show, Heath. Just thrilled to have you on. Why don't you let everyone know what you've got going on right now? I know it's a very busy time for you.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm still a new guy at heart. I got my start about 10 years ago at Football Guys because Sigmund Bloom put out a call on Twitter looking for game recappers. And that was all I did my first year, was just write a short recap of random NFL games. And it blossomed into this. I'm at CBS Sports, and I have kind of transitioned a little bit to doing more Dynasty stuff in the off season. We started Dynasty Fantasy Central. We didn't really have Dynasty coverage when I started at CBS Sports 6 years ago. And now we've got rankings, we've got tiers, we've got a trade chart, we've got mailbags, we've got mock drafts. So I do that. And then in season, it's more the traditional redraft stuff.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit before we went on air here, that Dynasty is starting to grow, but this time of year, this is when a lot of the redraft fans start to kind of plug in. We're psychos. We're sitting here in February trying to figure out ADP and, doing mock drafts in February and March. And it's fun for me. I did a Dynasty startup where I was able to get Joe Mixon in the sixth round and, take advantage of these, real impulsive moves that people are making. But this time of year, I think it's very important to kind of focus on redraft because those drafts are going to be starting soon. So let's go ahead and dive in. I want to start off with quarterbacks, and we'll start with you, Matt. Let's start with the best value. When we're looking at ADP, and for the sake of conversation, we're looking at Fantasy Pros ADP right now. Who is the guy that jumps out to you as just the screaming value right now?
So for me, there's like this whole tier, right? In years past, you've always said there's not too much of an incentive to really go get the elite or near elite guys. I think this year I'm starting to change that sort of focus because tight end for me, we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show, but I'm kind of punting most of the guys that aren't towards the top for that position. So for me, I think the perfect pick right now, because he's going last of the group, is Russell Wilson. I think currently he is the perfect pick. There's another guy, Carson Wentz, I also think at QB 21, currently 134th overall, is also a little crazy. But Russell Wilson, QB 6 right now for Fantasy Pros ADP. That is, to me, the perfect pick. He's a guy who can get you, in a 17-game season now, 4,250 yards or so. You're going to have the touchdowns. He was on such a monstrous pace in the first half of the year. And he has the rushing yards, 350. That's something he can really nail any kind of given year. It's really just a matter of, I think he's currently the last of that group, because that second half, he's averaging under 22 fantasy points a game compared to about 34 in the first 8. That's really the issue, I think, that people are considering him towards the back of the pack. And the reason a player I'm going to be talking about a little bit later on the worst QB is going to be really standing out. But for me, Russell Wilson currently, I do love Dak quite a bit, but just based off ADP. If I can get Russell Wilson last of the group and still have an advantage over half the league, that's who the guy I'm targeting right now.
And I feel like there's kind of two ways to look at Russell Wilson, because a lot of people are concerned because of that second half of the season that you called out. And then a lot of people are saying, hey, this is an opportunity to buy low. And then it's kind of crazy. You called out how many rushing yards he has. He's 32 years old now. You don't see many 32-year-old quarterbacks that are still scooting the way Russ does. So I love that call out. That's a great one, Matt. Now, Heath, same question for you. Who is the quarterback right now that is just jumping out as the best value to you in redraft drafts?
I keep refreshing because I think maybe people haven't adjusted yet to the news, but it's been long enough. Everyone's had plenty of time to adjust. It's still Ryan Tannehill, and it's maybe been Ryan Tannehill for 3 years in a row, but he's now QB 11 according to ADP. And this is a guy who I think Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers are the only two quarterbacks who have scored more fantasy points than him since he became the starter in Tennessee. He leads the league in yards per attempt, and he's second in passer rating. And he did all that without Julio Jones. I cannot imagine that they traded for Julio Jones and they're still going to throw it 460 times. And those low pass attempts are the only reason that Tannehill's not been a just no doubt top 3 or 4 fantasy quarterback. So I feel bad because I can't get him higher than 7th in my rankings. And it feels like Ryan Tannehill should be ranked as a top 5 quarterback. But anyone you're ranking at 7th, you're basically saying if he plays a full season, he'll finish top 5. So that's where I've got him. And he's a great value at QB 11.
Yeah, I just made the move where the two guys you called out. I moved Ryan Tannehill up to 6th in my rankings, and I moved him right ahead of Russell Wilson. And it was a tough decision to make. But the other thing is that since taking over as the starter, there's only one guy in the league that has a better QB rating than Ryan Tannehill, and that's Patrick Mahomes. So, I mean, this team, everybody on the Titans are just efficiency monsters. Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Ryan Tannehill. I'm with you. I think that they're going to throw a little bit more, and people don't want to believe it. They think that Derrick Henry's still going to get the ball 300 times on the ground. But with Arthur Smith gone, Derrick Henry getting a little bit older, I think that we are going to see a slightly different Titans team this year. So I love that call out. I am very bullish on Ryan Tannehill this year. I keep seeing these Scott Fishbowl drafts where he's getting dropped into like the 3rd round, and I had the 109 pick. Ryan Tannehill wasn't even on the board when it got to me. So some people are getting pretty savvy to how good this guy actually is. Great call out there, Heath. Now, we got to focus on the bad as well. So let's take a look at that. When you're looking through this list of guys and how they're getting drafted, Heath, we'll start with you. Who is just the guy that is a landmine right now that you want nothing to do with this current ADP?
I don't like this because, like, at quarterback specifically, nobody cares if a guy's overvalued and they're QB 15 and they should be 25. Like, you've got to say somebody that's pretty good. So I'm going to say the guy that is QB 7 by ADP, and it's Justin Herbert. And it's not an anti-Justin Herbert take, but he's kind of a pocket passer. He only ran 55 times last year. Got a little bit fortunate in terms of the rushing touchdowns with nearly a 10% rushing touchdown rate. And then the other thing was he wasn't particularly good in terms of efficiency as a passer last year. They just ran 1,100 plays. With a change in coaching staff, you wouldn't really expect them to be that fast-paced again, even if they kept all the same coaches. With all new coaches, you definitely shouldn't expect that. And I always get a little bit worried about a quarterback changing coordinators this early in their career, especially if it's not somebody that is just like a surefire home run hire. And I don't think Lombardi is that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not easy to say anything. You don't want to besmirch the name of Justin Herbert because you are going to get a lot of flack for it. But I agree with you. There are some red flags there that are being ignored. And another thing is you called out that he wasn't a rusher, and he did have some rushing yards, but almost all of those rushing yards last season came when Austin Eckler wasn't playing. So if you can expect that Austin Eckler, he's going to be healthy week 1, if you're expecting him to play a full season, that just caps his upside even more. So I'm with you. I love Justin Herbert. He's a fun player to watch, but he's not somebody that I'm really going out of my way to target. Matt, who do you have in the same spot that you're just kind of trying to avoid at the current ADP?
So I don't want to make people extremely mad because I know there's a lot of people like Herbert, but there's a lot more people like Patrick Mahomes.
Ooh.
And I kept looking over the list, and quarterback is tough, right? Because there's so many guys we love and so many guys we think are going to have great years. So when I see that just a barely past the first round, Patrick Mahomes is currently 14th overall. I know we hammer every single year. Don't take quarterbacks early. Don't take quarterbacks early. Well, last year it really came true. 11 quarterbacks had over 25 fantasy points per game compared to 3 in 2019 and 4 in 2018. So we're looking more quarterback play and more high efficiency, high stats, all the sort of things you kind of want for the position. You're seeing it in larger numbers. So Mahomes, if you're going to be taking him in a spot where you really need to nail down the elite receivers, the elite running backs, Kelsey, Kittle or Waller, who may fall into that group as well. I can't get behind a guy at Mahomes if you have to take him that early. Now, is Mahomes going to be, in most people's mind, the quarterback one, and he has no real reason to really argue against a second, maybe just Josh Allen to that extent, sure. But if you have, 11 people throwing for 4,000 yards and you have all these touchdowns just across the league, a lot of guys going into 30 touchdowns is not as hard to get as it was before. Mahomes is currently the worst value, and it's really unfortunate to say because he's going to be probably the number one quarterback, but he needs to do that much more. He needs to have like 5 points per game more than the next guy for me to think that's really worth it up there.
I think you bring up an interesting point because over the last 3 years, like combined, Mahomes has been about 3.5 points per game better than any other quarterback. And that's why I put him and Lamar Jackson kind of on a pedestal over the other guys, because they've shown us 30-point upside, not in the crazy 2020 season. I don't know totally what to make of the fact that 11 quarterbacks threw for that many yards or scored that many fantasy points last year. I don't know if we see a repeat of that, then Mahomes in the second is crazy. Now, all that being said, I still agree with you. He shouldn't go 14th.
Yeah, that's really the issue. It's can he be the number one quarterback and he has the clearest path to that? Yes. But to me, with a lot of guys I'm going to talk about today, it's not a matter of I don't hate the player. I really just hate the ADP. I hate what you have to pay for this price. He has the surest ticket to the fantasy gold land, really getting the, 500 plus attempts, 4,500 yards, whatever you want him to do, he's going to do it. Most guaranteed, but there's no guarantees. There's the highest success chance. But to me, I can't go with him right there. If you can get, 5th round Russell Wilson, like, Dak, all these kind of guys, it's just a different tier for me.
And I think, we always throw around the term Konami code, and I wish there was something better that we can say that, but just rushing upside, whatever you want to call it. Patrick Mahomes, he's going to run a little bit. He's going to scramble here and there, but he's more like an Aaron Rodgers where he's going to scramble when he needs to. I'd rather have somebody like Kyler Murray or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson that's going to give you that sky-high floor every single week because they're going to have plays drawn up for them to run the ball. So I know I'm absolutely in the minority here, but I don't have Patrick Mahomes as my QB1. I have Lamar Jackson as my QB1 for that exact reason. So I'm with you. Just taking quarterback in the second round, especially in a single QB league, isn't something that I'd want to do at all. So if that's what his current ADP is demanding, is 14th overall, I want nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about some running backs. And this one is a lot easier to talk about. Nobody wants to talk poorly about a top 10 quarterback, but there's a lot of running backs that I think are pretty polarizing that people have some pretty strong stances on. So Heath, we'll start with you on this one. Who is the guy that's a screaming value to you right now?
Well, I look at Fantasy Pros ADP and at running back, Mike Davis is running back 32 and he's in round 7. And I understand there are reasons to question whether Mike Davis could hold up for a full season as a lead running back. And I understand that maybe the Falcons will bring somebody in later in the offseason. That's certainly possible. But I don't really understand running back 32 in the 7th round. Like, we can argue about whether Mike Davis is a good 4th or 5th round pick. He was a top 12 running back with the Panthers last year. A lot of that was due to pass volume. But he was also playing behind arguably one of the worst offensive lines in football. I don't think the Falcons line is good, but it will be better than the Panthers. He was playing on a bad offense. The Falcons offense will provide more scoring opportunities. And his main competition for carries right now is Kadri Allison, a guy who 2 years in a row couldn't beat out Ito Smith or Brian Hill. So I don't have a lot of fear for him either, unless now he could certainly get Fournetted in the final weeks of training camp. And that's why you shouldn't push him too high. But if you told me that Mike Davis in his current role plays 17 games, I'd bet pretty good money he's going to be a top 15 running back.
Yeah, and you've got Arthur Smith there now, and we've seen what Arthur Smith has done with Derrick Henry over the last year. I'm not saying that, Mike Davis is anywhere near the player that Derrick Henry is, but
his quads are close.
Yeah, the quads are close. They both got gigantic quads. If you're a BMI guy, they're very much in that same bucket. But Mike Davis is somebody, when you said the name at first, I kind of scoffed a little bit. And then I looked and I saw how far he actually is. And that's crazy that he's getting drafted in the 7th round. I mean, if that's what his ADP is, I think he is a great value. And my only fear is what you already called out, that he could possibly get Fournetted, as you call it, because there's still some guys out there. Le'Veon Bell is still looking for a job. There's some guys that might get cut. They're talking about maybe Raheem Mostert or Melvin Gordon. If those guys end up hitting free agency, even Duke Johnson, that's kind of my fear, is that somebody goes in there and ruins his value. But if you know that starting week 1, Mike Davis is going to be the top guy on that team, and you can get him in the 7th round right now, I mean, that's the 2nd year in a row that Mike Davis could be a league winner for you. So same question to you, Matt. Who is the best value that you see at running back?
So when I sat down here, it was Mike Davis. It was Mike Davis. He is going to be the cheapest. And again, I'm gonna flex to another guy. He's possibly the cheapest featured running back we have. And it's honestly, if any guy comes through the door, I will change my mind. But the offensive coordinator and head coach are both in systems that had one guy just have majority of the snap. You had, with Henry, 3rd in total snaps this year, the offensive corner. Montgomery was 2nd total snaps. He was the passing game, but still he was used to having the running back, be just the featured guy there. Obviously Cohen hurt, but Davis, if it's everything stays as is, and I call him Neo because he dodged bullets in the draft and he dodged bullets in free agency, that he is the guy. Otherwise, I think you're going to like this, Dave, it's Chris Carson. For some reason, Chris Carson is never liked by anyone, and I don't understand it. And I didn't want to put 2 Seahawks. That wasn't my goal. But if Rashad Penny is still just not going to be healthy enough to see the field, and Travis Homer and DJ Dallas, they've filled in the past, but they're not anyone to, for me, currently really push that hard. And I like this offense. I believe they changed offensive corners in the offseason. Possibly that's something that really hindered it in the second half of the year, was just the Seahawks didn't really know how to play offense, because mostly what they've done for the past few years is hike the ball and let's see Russell Wilson do some magic. That's why I think he's a perennial MVP type player. But Carson, if he's just going to, again, be the only player in this backfield and a very good offense, and he does play in a somewhat tough division, but otherwise, Carson, for me, if he's going to be currently the 21st running back off the board, behind a guy I'm just going to talk about and poo-poo in just a second, Chris Carson, 38th overall. That is awesome to me. I know in Scott Fishbowl, I was trying to get him as a top 15 back. It's a little bit different, but I think that's what he should be treated as. Around that top 15, talking about guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, seeing in the realm of Najee Harris, and that's really my range of what he should be. And he's being considered in guys like Mike Davis, Gaskin, Hunt, a little bit different tier than what he should actually be thought of. And it's a little surprising we have to talk about this every single year with him.
I know, and I can't wrap my mind around it. I talk about Chris Carson all the time. I've written countless articles on him. I'm constantly tweeting about him, and it seems like I keep waiting for his ADP to creep up, because I feel like it always does, a week before the season. That's when people kind of have that realization, and I think what it is, first of all, he didn't have the draft capital. Then he had that fumbling problem his 2nd year, and then they went out and got Rashad Penny in the 1st round, and it seemed like he was going to be replaced. But since then, 2 years have passed since they drafted Rashad Penny, 3 years since they drafted Rashad Penny, 2 years since he had the fumbling problems, and since then, all he has done is everything you want to see a running back do to lock in a lead job. And sure enough, they rewarded him with a 2-year contract. And I think that, you could stop worrying about his draft capital now. They already rejected Rashad Penny's 5th-year tender. So this is the last year we're going to have to deal with Rashad Penny in Seattle. And then, like you called out, the guys behind him, I think it should show you how much faith they have in DJ Dallas and Travis Homer, that they went out and they got Alex Collins last year when Chris Carson got hurt. I mean, that's how much faith they have in DJ Dallas. So I'm with you. I have Chris Carson locked in as my RB12. I think that he's going to finish as an RB1. And, people worry about injuries. Well, guess what? Every running back gets injured. That's what you're doing. You're smashing into 300-pound men at full speed. It's going to happen. And his have come at a very unfortunate time. And I think that's kind of soured the taste of fantasy managers. But once again, Chris Carson remains one of the best values heading into yet another year. So, Heath, now we got to talk about the guys that we think aren't the best values. And who's the guy that jumps out to you right now that you are not going to be drafting at his current ADP?
His current ADP is number 5 overall. So this is a little bit risky, but Saquon Barkley. I don't know really that his upside that we saw in 2018 actually exists in 2021. I don't know that the potential target volume is there with a running quarterback like Daniel Jones. I don't know that the 5 yards per carry is there with an offensive line that could once again be one of the worst in football. And I don't know that the volume potential is there when they're not still setting a timetable for when he's going to be a full feature back. I expect a bit of a timeshare at the start of the season. I expect less efficiency or just the same efficiency we've seen the last 2 years when he's been on the field. And so if there's not number one overall upside, which I don't really think there is, and the risk is the fact that he's not currently ready to play football, I don't think he should be a first round pick.
Oh, you make a lot of good points there, and I don't have a rebuttal. I'm a huge Saquon Barkley fan, and for me, I just keep betting on the talent every single year because we see what this guy can do. His speed, his strength, his elusiveness, his agility, like he's got it all. But yeah, man, that offensive line certainly is worrisome, and I'm trying to bet on the talent and ignore the situation. But you make a lot of really good points there that I don't have a rebuttal at all. So Matt, same question, throwing it to you. Who's the guy that you're avoiding at his current ADP?
Possibly less spicy or more spicy, depending on what you think of Josh Jacobs. Because Saquon Barkley, I currently have as a second overall pick, so I'm a little shaken in my boots over here. But Josh Jacobs, I made a tweet a few weeks ago. If I can personally make his ADP drop 10 spots, I'll be happy being wrong on everything else this year. If either the Las Vegas Raiders don't know what they're doing contract-wise, or they want Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake to really be 1A, 1B, because they paid him basically the exact same amount of money as they currently have Jacobs on toll for. And they're basically the same players. So you have rushing attempts. Jacobs was third, 273. Drake, 239, seventh. Rushing yards, 1,065, 955. Touchdowns, 12 for Jacobs, 10 for Drake. It seems like these are carbon copies. And if you're going to have a guy that went and got 306 touches with very little sort of, competition behind him, Booker and Richard basically combined for the same amount of touches that Chase Edmonds had alone. It's not even accounting for Kyler Murray, who, if you can find his sort of rushing yards and his sort of touches, that's a Jonathan Taylor getting touches in that backfield. You had, 232 carries between Murray and Edmonds. You have all these yards, and it's a little bit different because as a quarterback, it's not exactly, it's a little bit of funny math, but I'm trying to make a point, so I'm going to pick out the stuff that makes me seem right. But I don't like that they went and did something like this. If you're going to have Jacobs be, in this top 20, and he was 30th overall at one point. So at least he's dropping from 30th to 37th, because that does make me feel a little bit better about him. Because at some point he does become a value. Yes, 100%, like any other player would. I don't like this offensive line has been all jumbled up. There was somewhat of a reach for Leatherwood. I know everyone kind of every single year doesn't like the Las Vegas's sort of draft picks, but you lose 3 offensive linemen in the offseason. Richie Incognito is 38 over at left guard. Colton Miller left tackle is kind of the same thing, but otherwise center, right guard, and right tackle are all new players. This is not a team that we saw with this offensive line, which was, I thought, a benefit to them. I thought that one thing they at least had going for them offensively was the offensive line, and they shipped everyone out. Ronnie Hudson in Arizona, Gabe Jackson to Seattle. I just can't get behind Jacobs currently, even ahead of guys like Mike Davis and Chris Carson, who were just sitting here saying that they're better values. And
part of me wonders when this has been updated, kind of similar to what you said about Ryan Tannehill, because Josh Jacobs' value is plummeting right now. So last night, I got the privilege to do this mock draft with a bunch of other guys in the industry, Marcus Grant and Ian Harditz and Chalk and Steffi Smalls. And we did a mock draft where I got Josh Jacobs in the 6th round. And if that is where he's falling to, I feel like he's a value at that point. But even that, I drafted Josh Jacobs in the 6th round, and I got clowned by everybody for taking Josh Jacobs. I mean, I feel like the disrespect has gotten a little bit too far. But yeah, when I'm looking at, yeah, and there I'm okay taking him, because even if he sees half the workload he saw last year, I think he could still pay off as a 6th round pick. But looking right here where they've got him ranked at RB 15 in the ADP. That is absolutely too rich for my blood. So I'd agree with you on that one, Matt. Now let's talk about some wide receivers. And this is another one that I think is kind of easy to cherry pick some guys that really, really stand out there, whether you want to look at the, top end of the ADP or you want to, pick somebody down low. There are just ADP discrepancies all over the place right now that we'll see if they get fixed by the time the draft season rolls around. But Matt, we'll start with you on this one here. Who is the guy that you think is the best value as far as wide receivers go?
There is currently a whole group. It's fun. It's funny. I'm just going to pick out like 10 guys at once. There's going to be one name that I really settle upon, but currently from like wide receiver 42, which would be Marquise Brown, all the way down to Mike Williams at wide receiver 55. I think this is the gold, like the total gold vein for most ADP across any of the real spots. I think a lot of these receivers are guys that their 2020 is now dictating what people think for 2021, almost to like a harsh, account. Antonio Brown, Gallup, Pittman, Chenault, Brown, Williams, like I said before. Somehow I ended up being, one of the highest rankers right now of Mike Williams of Fantasy Pros without even knowing about it. But the guy I really want to pick on is Antonio Brown at wide receiver 46. That is just very, very, very nice. It over, so what is he missed the first 8 games of the season because of suspension, all the off-field stuff, but 108th overall, right? I think he should be in like the mid 30s. I think this is a guy that when you saw them went out there was a plan that the Buccaneers had. Only one less target in Evans to lead since he was active to lead the team. 63 for Evans, 62 for Brown. He led all 3 of the major receivers in red zone targets. Because at first I was like, doesn't have a lot of red zone work. He had 5, which led all 3 of them. So I was like, okay, so this is their red zone guy actually when he was on the field. That's something I like. I'm going to compare him a little bit to the guy I don't like, but he's going to outscore this other receiver. And if you can get him as that flex receiver or as that, 6th, 7th, whatever it may be round value, because 108th, we're talking like what, round 9, if my math is right, because math's hard. He's like such a perfect steal. I think is they want to tool this offense the same way they did last year, and they took him a little while to get Mr. Bruce Arians' playbook onto wraps, but second half of the year, you saw this was a team that was able to compete for the Super Bowl and ended up actually winning. So them just staying like, all right, repeat, let's go again. All about Antonio Brown Reeves right now.
I'm with you. If you look at playoff games included, they played in 11 games together last year. That whole trio of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown had 76 targets. Mike Evans had 77 targets. Chris Godwin had 78 targets. These guys are getting almost identical volume, and Mike Evans, Chris Godwin are going in the 2nd and 3rd round, and then you can have Antonio Brown in the 10th. That's one that just I can't wrap my mind around. He scored 6 touchdowns in his last 6 games. It's Antonio Brown. This guy was a a top 3 overall guy for 6 consecutive years, and people just suddenly forget about it. But I do like that whole call out because I'm with you. That whole area right there, there's just some streaming values nonstop. Heath, is there one guy that jumps out to you that you see as a great value right here?
Well, I agree with the whole section, and the guy I actually had on my list was Antonio Brown. But I am ready to pivot. I want to add one more Antonio Brown stat because this one is the one that like blew my mind when I first saw it and still blows my mind. If you just go to Pro Football Reference to the Bucks page and sort by receptions per game or targets per game, Antonio Brown actually led the team in both. And he's going like 6 rounds after Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and more on Mike Evans later. There's a lot of wide receivers in that range. I will go just a little bit higher though, and I know why it is, but I think Tyler Lockett is extremely undervalued. Yes, he is boom or bust, and he has weeks that win you the week, and he has weeks that are absolutely terrible. But truth be told, most everybody in Seattle was terrible at the end of last year. DK Metcalf wasn't very good in the second half. Russell Wilson, we talked about it already. He wasn't very good in the second half. I'm not going to hold that against Lockett, who's been a pretty reliable top 15, top 16 wide receiver. And the thing I love about him is he's shown ability. We've seen this with Stephon Diggs too. He can win as the short area target. He can win as the deep threat. Right now, he's more the short area target. And I think in this new offense they're bringing to Seattle, where they're talking about getting the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands quicker. Those are the types of routes that Tyler Lockett generally runs, not DK Metcalf. So I don't think Lockett's target share is going anywhere. I have him as a top 15 wide receiver once again this year, and I believe he's 23rd currently by wide receiver ADP.
Yeah, and a lot of people get scared off by that volatility, but at the end of the year, he's going to finish as a wide receiver 1 most likely. There aren't a lot of competition for targets there. It's just Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to be muting I don't know if you guys are picking this up or not, but there is an insane hailstorm right now that I'm looking at right outside my window. So I don't know if you can hear my house just getting pelted with hail right now. Once I'm done with the show, I'll hop up on the ladder and check for some damage. But there is a wild storm going on right outside my window as we speak. But let's stick on wide receivers, and I want to see if there's a guy that you are avoiding at his current ADP. I'm just going to throw it out right now, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, but Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are the two guys that I'm avoiding because, like we said, with Antonio Brown being such a screaming value, why would you pay up for somebody who's going to be putting up similar production to somebody that you can get in the 9th, 10th round? I hope I didn't steal your pick, but who do you have, Heath, that you're avoiding at their current ADP?
100% stole my pick. I had this great little flow going between Antonio Brown and Mike Evans and White, and
Let's
you
hear
guys
it.
just stole them both. But no, I would just say, if you just look at what Mike Evans did last year, and he's had big touchdown seasons before. So just use his career touchdown rate instead of the incredible 14% touchdown rate he had last year. At his career touchdown rate, he scores about half as many touchdowns, and he finishes right next to Cole Beasley around wide receiver 28. He might see a small uptick in targets. I just don't understand how. OJ Howard's coming back too. Tom Brady's going to throw a quarter of his passes to running backs, and Antonio Brown had a major impact. So no, I'm not drafting Mike Evans at wide receiver 14. I'm not drafting Chris Godwin at wide receiver 17. And it makes me uncomfortable because they are obviously very good players. And maybe the way that we're wrong is that Tom Brady's actually QB1 and he throws for 6,000 yards this year. But that's the only way any of it makes any sense.
So I know you said that you came from Football Guys, and that's where I'm actually working right now. I'm over at Football Guys, and Matt Waldman has Tom Brady as his QB1. Even though we know that he's going to rush for, less than 5 yards on the entire season, he still has him locked in as the QB1 just because of the weapons that he has and, another year with Bruce Arians. So I can understand the, upside that Tom Brady has here, but I'm with you. And this is something, I do multiple shows a week. And I feel like this is something that I've just been hearing from everybody, and I've been saying myself for months. Antonio Brown is underrated. Mike Evans is overrated. And for some reason, we still aren't seeing them tighten up at all in drafts. I'm doing Scott Fishbowl right now. I just got Antonio Brown in the 10th round, 9th pick overall. He's still dropping to the end of the 10th round, and I just don't understand why. Matt, let me throw it to you. Hopefully you didn't have something queued up for Mike Evans as well.
No.
Hopefully you got somebody else to talk about. Who's your guy that is a little bit overvalued right now?
Mike Evans has something to do with him, but it's not Mike Evans. It's Adam Thielen. If he's going to be treated as a top 20 receiver, he's got to do more than what he was currently doing because it's really just touchdowns. That's all he did was touchdowns. If 48% of his total fantasy points come in 4 games and, it's 7 games under 50 yards, but he had, top 12 in overall touchdown count. And most of the guys that were up there are all guys that are going in the first round. The other ones you're going to have were Josh Jacobs, where he spoke about, Mike Evans, Cam Newton. He's in a weird spot. So when you see that big a touchdown range, you're like, all right, this is something we don't really want to account for. But he was in bottom 3 of the top 20 receivers last year in yards. Only Smith-Schuster and Robert Woods were under 950, and receptions. He also failed to hit 75. The only other two to do that were A.J. Brown and Mike Evans. I don't like that he's in both of those categories. If he's just so reliant on scoring, and you do have Justin Jefferson, and I still think that it's possibly a little bit of incorrect way of what they actually wanted to go about doing their actual offensive plan. I think this is still a team that wants to run the ball. They had the 6th most rush attempts, so they were leaning towards running that much more often than passing. If you're going to look at a guy like this where he had so much of his work come from just scoring, which is definitely something you can account for. I don't like projecting. I don't like talking too much about touchdowns as something that of a positive sense for the year afterwards, because it's not something you're really going to say, 10 touchdowns. Let's just, lock it in. There's no guarantee of that happening. You can have 4 touchdowns happen in one game. You can have no touchdowns happen for half the season. But I don't like that he had so much of what he used to be sort of disappear. Somewhat could be because Justin Jefferson just went out and did some stuff that rookies haven't been doing in, a decade or so. But I can't get
it was the all-time receiving record for rookies.
You had what the most yards, like top 7, 7th in yards per target, 12th in targets, 6th in reception, most receiving yards since 1990. Like all these sort of things. Justin Jefferson is he was that guy. I'm also a little bit lower on Jefferson as well, a little bit. So. Adam Thielen, no thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Adam Thielen is a little bit overvalued right now. And what I will say to kind of counter your point is I think that Justin Jefferson might even be undervalued, believe it or not. I mean, what he did last year, 1,400 yards is unbelievable, but he did it on just 88 catches. And then he only had 6 touchdowns as well. So there's, possibility that he regresses to more touchdowns this year. I mean, it's unbelievable that Adam Thielen was able to pull in 14 touchdowns last year on the target share that he had. So I expect that to kind of even out a little bit next year. So I don't know if Justin Jefferson's going to be able to hit 1,400 yards again, but I think that he's going to see even more of an opportunity. I think that he's going to regress to a better touchdown rate because he's a big play waiting to happen. I believe he was third overall in yards per catch for players that saw 80 or more targets. So he's a big play waiting to happen, and just it didn't translate into many touchdowns last year. Another shocking stat, I just heard this while I was on a show the other day. Somebody dropped this on me. He didn't have a single touchdown on the road. All 6 of his touchdowns came at home. So hopefully he can, get a little confidence, get that mojo going on the road next year, and we can see him do it consistently over a whole season. But with as deep as wide receivers are, I want to see, can you guys pull out one more guy that you think is somebody that we should be avoiding at their current ADP? Matt, do you have somebody lined up? If not, I'm sure Heath can chop this one up right off the top of his head.
I will say one that's undervalued real quick.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's Michael Thomas at 9. I think what's going to happen is as soon as a quarterback is chosen, you're going to have people say, if it's Taysom Hill, allows them to do more things. And if it's Jameis Winston, they don't have an actual quarterback who can go out and throw for 5,000 yards and do the 30-30 sort of deal. I think as soon as any quarterback is announced as the quarterback, and there's still a possibility to do a 2 QB system because Taysom Hill is just loved by Sean Payton. I think his ADP rises no matter what. I think everyone's just kind of keeping it down just because there's not a guy listed. But as soon as that happens, I think he jumps up a little bit because 9, which is right around where Jacobs used to be, was very that's incorrect. And I think wide receiver as a whole is being a little undervalued. But Thomas, as soon as a QB is announced, I think jumps up a little bit. This is a guy who just set the receptions record like 2 years ago. Why can't he do it again?
That's such an interesting thing to point out, and I think you're spot on. Like right now, there's uncertainty, and that's why people are nervous. But whether they come out today and say Taysom Hill is going to be the quarterback or Jameis Winston, I think just having that concrete answer of who it's going to be is going to push him up draft boards. That's interesting. There's some psychological mind play going on in people's heads doing that. But I think that you're spot on, Matt. So Heath, is there anybody one more receiver you want to talk about that jumps out as either a value or a not great value for you?
Yeah, I see Odell Beckham here at wide receiver 27 in round 6, and I'm out. And I don't we've not really seen him be that guy that he was in New York since he's been in Cleveland. He has more games in Cleveland with fewer than 30 yards than he has with over 100 yards. He doesn't get the same target share. He's not been as explosive. Again, kind of like Barkley, we don't know for sure about the health situation, and Beckham's had a lot more injury concerns than Saquon Barkley has. It's a run-heavy offense. I don't expect a big target share. I don't expect wild efficiency. I don't have Odell Beckham in my top 36 wide receivers.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most polarizing guys out there because some people are saying that he's going to return back to that low-end wide receiver 1 form, but I just looked at this recently, and Odell Beckham, his 16-game paces when he was with the Giants, he was seeing 107 receptions per season. Since joining Cleveland, his 16-game pace is 67 per season. So, I mean, if that's all he's going to be getting is 67 receptions per season, that's not somebody that I want even as my wide receiver 2, which is where he's getting drafted right now. So I feel like I kind of swing back and forth on Odell Beckham Jr. all the time. Sometimes I'm like, maybe he's a good value this late, and then I see what he's done thus far in Cleveland, and it makes me kind of want to avoid him. So that's a good call out. Now let's go ahead and wrap up on tight ends. And Heath, we'll start with you on this one. Who is the guy that you think is the best value as far as tight ends go?
I'll go with Blake Jarwin at tight end 28, I believe, currently by ADP. I've got him as a borderline top 12 tight end. I think he should win the competition, if it even is one, with Dalton Schultz relatively easily. They paid Jarwin. Jarwin was going to be the guy over Schultz before he got hurt. And this is a team that, even though they have the 3 wide receivers, even though they throw to their running backs, they still throw the ball 100, 110 times per season to the tight end position as well. And those tight ends get a lot of looks in the red zones. We saw Jason Witten be a borderline top 12 tight end when he had absolutely no juice left whatsoever. As long as Jarwin is back to 100%, I think he could be a borderline top 12 guy this year.
Yeah, I think that Blake Jarwin right now at his age is probably in better shape than Jason Witten was coming out of the press booth. So I'd agree with you there. And Heath, I just got to say, man, I respect your opinion. And almost every guy you're calling out as a good value is somebody that I've drafted in Scott Fishbowl so far. So thank you for just boosting my confidence a little bit. I'm feeling great about this SFB roster right now. Matt, let me throw the same question to you. Who is the tight end that is jumping out as a value to you?
I'm going, into the barrel as well. We're going real deep down there with Adam Troutman. So third round pick, last year? This is a team that needs a third option. Do you technically need a third option behind Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara because they're so fantastic? Possibly not. But this is like the third year we've been waiting for like Traquan Smith to be the breakout. Marquez Callaway was an undrafted rookie. He didn't really kind of get going for most of the year. I think he missed about 5 games with an injury. Right now with he is the tight end standing. He doesn't really have too much competition in terms. I think it's just Nick Vannett is the only other tight end really, to consider much competition in terms of what is Troutman going to see. Again, I think it's just a little bit of, do we need to wait for a quarterback to be announced? Some will say, again, if it's whether it's Hill or Winston, however they may go. But going back to his like real draft capital, like 95th percentile agility score, 81st percentile in the catch radius, people liked him at the draft. This is all stuff that we were looking at. Is he going to be sort of an athletic tight end, which is a nice spot to start? Because if they can run, catch, and do all the extra sort of things instead of just being a big guy, just lumbering around, if they can be, if this guy sort of looks like what George Kittle can sort of be, we're looking at it again just for free. Again, he raised his eyes quite a bit there. I'm just talking about guys who can really do more than it just was asked of them. If he can be the third option on a Saints offense, I know it's a little bit different with Breeze gone, but Breeze was, his arm was really going. They can do more with whatever Hill or Winston may be. If he's the third option, I love him, and he shouldn't be, just really just buried down there. Same thing with Jarwin. These are offenses that we're considering top 5 in the NFL. You still want pieces. I know with Jarwin, he might be the 5th guy. And with Troutman, he might be the 3rd guy, and he could be the 4th or 5th. But at tight end, which you're really just looking for touchdown upside, if you're going to get these guys this cheap, which is really the real benefit for me, because I really don't like most of the top 12 currently where they're going, I'm going to wait on guys like this. I want to wait on the Jarwins. I want to wait on the Troutmans. And really just get a backlog of guys, because we were talking about, Waller a few years ago. I mean, Dave were at CBS. You can really hang his hat that Dave was the Waller guy. He was talking about him the whole offseason back, a few years back. And it's like, listen, there's guys like this who are going to show up. Last year, Jay Sternberger was who we thought would be for the Packers. It ended up being Robert Tonyan. But there was an idea saying you want to go and get touchdowns. You want to go and get athleticism at this position. And for me, I think Troutman does show that. Now it's time for him to actually step up as a tight end one and us to see it.
All right. So if we're making the Sternberger, Robert Tonyan, I think what we should do then is go out and get Nick Vannett, because it's going to be the number 2 guy on the depth chart that really steps forward, right? So that's who we should be looking at, is Nick Vannett. And, I'm with you. I like Troutman. He's a guy that I've been targeting late. But I just want to pump the brakes on that George Kittle comparison. George Kittle ran a 4.5. Listen. Adam Trout ran a 4.8. They're a little bit different as far as athleticism. So I'm with you on Troutman, but let's pump the brakes on the Kittle comparisons for now.
Listen, we'll only be fun here, right?
All right, Matt, we'll go with you on this one as well. Who is the guy, as far as tight ends go, that you want nothing to do with right now at the ADP?
It's Kyle Pitts. It's Kyle Pitts. If he goes and does what everyone wants him to do, congratulations, because 894 since 1990 is the most for yards. 128 is the most for targets for rookies, for rookie tight ends. 74 receptions. This is all Jeremy Shockey back in 2002.
Yep. And
touchdowns was Gronk in 2010. That second year, there is a jump. You see Kittle, 1377. You see targets, 149 for Graham. You see receptions, 99 for Graham. You see touchdowns, 17 for Gronkowski. But let's just look at just base level thresholds, right? So for rookies, let's see how many people got 600 yards since 1990. Only 5. Targets of 70, just 10. Receptions of 40, 21. In the second year, yards for 600, 27. Targets, 46. Receptions 50. There is a jump for that second year. Now Kyle Pitts, highest tight end value of all time, where he was picked and all that. Great. He can be everything we want him to be, but people are already announcing him as this receiver type, and he's going to set the world on fire. He's still a tight end to me, and he's creeping to be a top 50 pick, and that's where I'm out. And that's where I'm out really. If Hawkinson and Andrews also creep into a top 50 pick, because we do this every single year, where the first 3 bring the next 3 up. Because you want to try and get a little bit of what currently, to me, Kelsey, Kittle, and Waller are going to do. Kelsey's my only real first round value. The other 2 are going to mix in second, third, and all that sort of stuff. But they're bringing them up to be top 50 picks, and I can't get behind that. It's really a problem for like even guys who gets about 200 fantasy points, about 212. It's 12 and a half points per game. If you're having such a real lack of, guys like that, because, 200 fantasy points is like wide receiver like 37 last year, and only had 2 guys even hit 200 fantasy points for tight end. Kelsey and Waller and Kittle, those are advantages. But if I can't get the next kind of guys, and Pitts right now, it has the most hype around him, I'm out.
Yeah, I've said enough bad things about Kyle Pitts, and not even Kyle Pitts. I like Kyle Pitts the player.
I love
don't
him.
like Kyle Pitts the ADP, and I'm just not even going to add to this before Kyle Pitts, sends somebody to my house, a cousin or something to rough me up a little bit. So I'm just off on this conversation. I agree with you, Matt, and let's throw it to Heath. Who's the guy whose ADP at tight end right now is too rich for your blood?
Well, nobody will get mad at me for talking bad about this guy. Evan Ingram is somehow still a top 12 tight end in both non-PPR and PPR. And Evan Ingram hasn't actually been very good either of the last 2 years. And he really only had his rookie year is the only year that was for a full season kind of acceptable. And now they go and add Kyle Rudolph, and they add Kenny Golladay, and they add Kadarius Toney, and they get back Saquon Barkley. I don't really want Evan Ingram as my number 2 tight end. I'm not sure the Giants want Evan Ingram all that much. So I would prefer to not draft him at all. Maybe there's a way that he's available in round 16 in the Scott Fish Bowl, and I have to eat my own words. But no, I don't want to use the drops argument, because I think drops are generally not that predictive. But it's not just been drops with Evan Ingram. He's not used in a way that makes him very valuable, especially with the way that he has produced.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Ingram is like the antithesis to what we know about tight ends. He came out and showed up as a rookie and then has just progressively gotten worse and worse every year thereafter. I mean, Evan Ingram is really a head-scratching case as to what to expect in a tight end. And I agree with you. So far it feels like his production and efficiency haven't been good, but it's been propped up because of volume. And now with this slew of pass catchers that are added to this offense heading into 2021, I don't think that he's really going to see that opportunity anymore. So that's a great call out as well. Now, before we wrap up, just wondering if there's anybody else that you guys had that you just wanted to talk about that we didn't get to for whatever reason. Is there one more player that you guys wanted to call out in any position at all?
Yeah, I can bring up some kickers if you want. We can do that.
No, we're not going to talk about kickers. We've talked about kickers enough this week with SFB.
It's fun that he just said Evan Ingram, because I literally just made him as my my round 10 pick before we went on the show, because I was the last one to take a tight end. So that's always feels good. I do want to talk about real quick. I kind of want to pick Heath's brain in a sense about Denver, the Denver running backs. Javonte Williams has been crowned as the lead back apparently, and I just want to know if we're really jumping the gun a little bit on that, because this is, it's a system that's really operated with 2 backs for a few years now, and every year might be a little bit different. But if Melvin Gordon goes to Atlanta, this is great. Works that out for everyone. Javonte Williams is running back there, and we can have Melvin Gordon in Atlanta. But what do you feel on Williams, really? Because I currently am not very fond of where he's over. That's 66 overall, almost a top 24 back.
Yeah, I mostly feel the same way, and I'm always a little bit skeptical of guys coming in as rookies that weren't workhorses in college. I generally think if you're a part-time and back in college, you're very likely to be in a committee. And I have come around a little bit on Williams, because I kind of was of the impression that it was likely that Melvin Gordon would lead the team this year, that Williams would be heavily involved, that he'd be the second back, and then he would take over after this year. It's beginning to sound more like Javonte Williams will be the lead back, which makes him a high-end number 3 running back for me. But I don't want to take a high-end number 3 running back in round 5. You can usually find those in round 7 or round 8. So I have not drafted any Javonte Williams yet, and I don't anticipate I'm going to be able to.
Because really, what's the difference between him and like David Johnson? I mean, it's technically a better offense, but it feels very much like the same sort of situation. And Johnson's the 82nd overall player. I kind of would rather take Johnson in a sense of just where he's going. I don't love Houston. I don't really think they're going to produce much points, but I don't really want to just. Williams is just creeping up too high for me. So would you rather have Johnson kind of at his ADP compared to?
Yeah, I would. And I would even say like the one rookie who's going to be in a committee who hasn't been a workhorse back, who I'm more excited about, would probably be Trey Sermon. Just because Trey Sermon went to a position where if he ends up being the guy that starts the game at running back, I expect he's going to run for 100 yards like everybody else does when they're the starting running back for the 49ers.
Yeah, I think, I love Trey Sermon. I feel like outside of Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, Trey Sermon might have the highest ceiling of any rookies out there. And I live in Colorado, and obviously, being at Football Guys, I get the privilege of talking to Cecil Lammey all the time. And I've asked him the same question, and it doesn't even sound like the Broncos know what they want to do right now. They're just kind of working their way through camp. They don't know who the quarterback's going to be, who the lead running back is going to be, but hopefully we get some clarity over the next couple weeks. But I want to thank both of you guys for coming on today. This show is just so much fun for me, getting a chance to just, get two people together, help increase in people's audiences. Matt, you've been a good friend of mine, and I think I speak on behalf of the entire community that we are so happy to have you back here. So before we sign off, why don't you let everyone one more time know where they can find you on Twitter and what you've got going on?
So at Methodical One, it's right around here. And at Gridiron Ratings, for both the Twitter and on the website, gridironratings.com. So very soon, I was certified for Fantasy Pros this year. Very excited for that. Rankings will be on there soon. Like I said, I'm always checking, with me and Kluge, seeing where we're feeling on guys, sort of deal. So when I was Josh Jacobs, the lowest ranker at one point, I had to see like, all right, why do I hate him this much? I did move him up quite a little bit, but it's very, very soon. Like I said, show could be coming out this week. All redraft. That's what I'm doing, baby. All redraft stuff. I'm the redraft boy for gridironratings.com. So very much looking forward to it.
Well, keep an eye out for that. One of the smoothest voices in the industry.
Thank you.
And then Heath, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and what you've got going on right now as well?
Yeah, at Heath Cummings SR on Twitter, and I'll be on CBS Sports HQ starting in August. We'll have Fantasy Football Today back every day on CBS Sports HQ. Right now, we've got Fantasy Football Today, the podcast, on YouTube and anywhere that you find podcasts every day as well. So we're ramping up for another crazy season.
About it. It's going to be here before we know it. The winter is almost over, the winter drought of NFL, so we will be back there in no time. Thank you guys both so much for coming on today, and thank you to everybody that was able to tune in. We will see you next week as we're going to do a dive into injuries. I've got Stefania Bell with ESPN and Adam Hutchison with 4 for 4 coming on, and we are going to talk about Saquon Barkley, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, and everybody else you are worried about heading into 2020. So we will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in.